Settle in and do not look away. This entire story is a single chilling journey that is best experienced in full. If you appreciate tales of the supernatural, show your support by subscribing. It lets us know you want more. Now, listen closely. When we reached his house, the porch light was on. Neither of us had left it on. We stopped in the driveway and stared at the yellow square of light glowing over the sagging steps. The front curtains were still drawn, no visible movement inside. Ethan cut the engine and listened. The night around the house seemed too still even for a rural road. No barking dog, no television through a neighbour's wall. Just wind moving lightly through dead grass. "Stay here," he said. "No," he looked at me. "I'm not sitting alone in this car while you check the house," I said. That, apparently, was reasonable enough. We got out together. The gravel under our shoes sounded much too loud. Ethan drew the revolver before we reached the porch, but held it low. I clutched the notebook under one arm and the labelled Polaroid inside my jacket pocket with the other hand, as though both might still matter if a gun didn't. The front door was closed, locked according to Ethan after he tested it. But the porch light... He glanced up at it with a frown, then reached into his pocket, took out a ring of keys, and stopped dead. One key on the ring had a strip of white tape wrapped around the head. On the tape, in dark marker, were 2 words. Porch timer. Ethan stared at it like it had bitten him. "What?" I whispered. He held the keyring up for me to see better. "That wasn't there before." I swallowed. "You're sure?" He gave me a flat look. Right, people in Bellmere did not casually overlook new labels attached to objects they depended on to remain functional. He unlocked the door. The smell that met us from inside was wrong immediately. Not rot, not gas. Wet earth. A cold, mineral smell, like freshly turned dirt and soaked paper. Ethan flicked the interior light on. The entryway was intact. The notes still covered the walls. The table still held cassettes and mugs and scattered pens. But several of the notes had changed places. I knew that because I had spent enough time there earlier for the room to form a rough map in my head. And now that map was slipping. A warning card that had been near the stairs now hung beside the kitchen archway. 2 photographs from the twine line were missing. A large sheet of butcher paper near the hall had been turned upside down. The effect was minor and devastating. Someone had entered without needing to destroy anything. Someone had only needed to rearrange the labels. Ethan moved slowly through the front room, flashlight in one hand, revolver in the other. "Nothing missing?" I whispered. "That would be easier." He went straight to the wall with the rule cards. All 8 were still there. No, not all 8. A 9th card had been added, pinned at the bottom in neat block handwriting, neither his nor mine. 9. If Daniel remembers the invitation, it is too late to burn the list. I felt the blood drain from my face. Ethan ripped the card down so hard the pin flew across the room. "Invitation," I said. He didn't answer. Ethan? Still nothing. He was already moving, faster now, crossing to a locked cabinet near the stairs. He opened it with shaking hands and took out 3 notebooks, an old manila folder, and a metal box with a latch. Tell me what invitation means. His silence became its own answer. The smell of wet earth seemed stronger now, not from the front room, from deeper inside the house. The basement door. 3 soft knocks came from below. I almost screamed. Ethan didn't flinch this time. He slammed the cabinet shut and shoved the manila folder at me. Read only what's clipped, he said. What is this? Read. Then he crossed to the basement door and drove the bolt home with a metallic crack, as though that still mattered. I opened the folder with numb fingers. Inside were old copies, county records, newspaper clippings, handwritten transcripts. Most were bound together with rusting paper clips or marked with red tabs. At the top was a single sheet clipped separately from the rest. In Ethan's handwriting, for Daniel only, if Rule 9 appears. Beneath it, a paragraph. I began reading aloud without meaning to. There are accounts suggesting Bellmere does not remove people randomly. In at least 4 documented cases, the subject had some prior indirect contact with the town before arrival. A letter, recommendation, inherited record, roadside mention, job posting, property inquiry, or verbal suggestion from a person whose memory later proved unstable. Mara believed this was not coincidence. She called it the invitation pattern. My mouth had gone dry. I kept reading. Her theory, Bellmere does not simply forget people. It selects people whose identities are already loosened by grief, transition, debt, divorce, relocation, social isolation, or unresolved historical ties. The invitation is not supernatural in form. It is administrative, mundane, easy to accept. That may be the point. I stopped. The room seemed to tilt around me. Divorce, relocation, isolation, a fresh start. I looked up slowly at Ethan. He stood with his back half turned, listening to the basement, but I could still see the guilt in his face. You knew, I said. I suspected. You knew. He turned then. Not before you came, not clearly, but after. A beat. Yes. The word landed like a fist. I laughed once in disbelief and anger. So you met me in the library, realized I fit some pattern in your folder, and what? Decided to wait and see if the town ate me? That isn't fair. Fair? The basement knocked again. I barely heard it. My own blood was louder now. You knew Mara had my name before she disappeared. Yes. You knew Bellmere calls people in. Yes. And you didn't tell me. Ethan stepped toward me. Because by the time I understood what your arrival meant, you were already in the early stages. I needed you stable enough to hear it. Or useful enough. That stopped him. Good, because I wanted it to. For a second, neither of us moved. Then the cassette recorder on the table clicked on by itself again. Not Mara's voice this time. Mine. Calm, even, almost conversational. "Don't fight him on this," my recorded voice said. "He only lies when he thinks it's merciful." I froze. Ethan lunged for the recorder and ripped the batteries out with a violence born of practice. Silence hit the room. My hands were shaking too badly to hold the folder steady. "Was that real?" I asked. Ethan didn't answer. "Was that me?" His eyes met mine, and that was answer enough. The basement door gave a slow creak, not opening, bending, as if something on the other side had leaned its full weight against it in patient curiosity. Ethan moved quickly then, the argument gone, replaced by urgency. "Help me." With what? The list. He took the metal box to the table, snapped the latch and opened it. Inside were index cards bundled with rubber bands, old photographs, folded maps, cassette tapes, and something else. A stack of envelopes, each addressed in different handwriting to different people. On the top envelope, in faded blue ink, was written, "Mr. Nolan Price." I stopped breathing. That's my friend. I know. My fingers went cold. The envelope below it read, "Miss Ellen Pike." Below that, "Lewis Granger." Below that, more names I didn't know. And near the bottom, Daniel Mercer. My own envelope had been opened already. I looked up at Ethan with a kind of sick amazement. "Where did you get these?" "The church." The answer made no sense at first. Then too much sense. I remembered one of the notes on his wall. "Don't let them clean the church." What church? There's only one in Bellmere. The white one on Main. Yes. Why would my name be in a church? Because Bellmere keeps some of its invitations where people mistake administration for care. The sentence was so monstrous in its ordinary logic that for a second I couldn't process it. He shoved the bundle of envelopes toward me. "Look at yours." I didn't want to. I did it anyway. The paper was old, maybe older than it should have been. The flap had already been torn open. Inside was a single folded sheet. When I unfolded it, I recognized the wording instantly. Not word for word, but in shape. The tone. The promise. The gentle, practical suggestion of beginning again somewhere quiet. A typed recommendation on plain stationery. Bellmere has affordable short-term rentals and a stable pace of life. Good for individuals in transition. Ask for Mercer Street if you want privacy. No signature. No official letterhead. Just enough information to feel helpful. Just little enough to be hard to trace. At the bottom, handwritten in blue ink, "He'll say yes once he's tired enough." I sat down without choosing to. The chair caught me hard. For a moment I was no longer in Ethan's house. I was back on the phone with Nolan, hearing him talk about Bellmere. Quiet, cheap, forgettable in the best possible way. Only now I heard something underneath it, a subtle stiffness in the phrasing, as if he had been reading, not writing the recommendation himself, reading it to me. My stomach rolled. "He didn't know," Ethan said. "What?" Nolan. Most likely he didn't know. That's how this works. Suggestions pass through people. They think they're helping. They remember the idea before they remember where they got it. I looked at the envelope in my hand. The paper smelled faintly of dust and mildew and something medicinal, like old closets and forgotten offices. "How many?" I asked. "I don't know." "How many invitations?" "Enough to form a pattern." The basement door thudded once, harder this time, not a knock. Impact. Then my own voice from below said pleasantly, "Daniel, you already accepted." I shut my eyes. For one instant, against my will, an image flashed across my mind. Not memory. A scene. A narrow church office. Filing cabinets. Wooden drawers. Envelopes sorted alphabetically. A woman's hand moving across them, choosing one, then another. Dust floating in slants of late afternoon light. The image vanished so fast I almost doubted it, but the feeling remained. Recognition. Not of the place, of the act. Like some part of me had been expected. I opened my eyes and found Ethan watching me. "You saw something." I swallowed. "Maybe." "What?" "I don't know." "Tell me anyway." I told him. The church office, the drawers, the hand choosing envelopes. When I finished, Ethan had gone very still. "That's new," he said. "That doesn't sound good." "It isn't." "Why?" "Because until now, none of the late-stage subjects ever reported seeing the invitation system from the inside. Late stage. Again, that phrase. I laughed weakly. "You really know how to comfort people." He ignored that. "If you're seeing internal structures, then whatever's using the removals may be trying to fold you into process." I stared at him. "Fold me into what?" Before he could answer, the lights in the house went out. Everything vanished at once. Lamp, hall bulb, porch light, kitchen glow. Darkness slammed shut around us. I heard Ethan curse softly and the scrape of the flashlight being snatched up from the table. It clicked on. The beam shook once across the walls of notes and taped photographs, then stopped. Pinned to the basement door, illuminated in the circle of light, was a photograph that had not been there a second earlier. A Polaroid, fresh, still developing. My own face stared back at us from the milky center. Not from Ethan's kitchen table. From inside the church office I had just described. I was standing beside a row of filing drawers, one hand resting on an open cabinet. And in the photo, I was smiling. Below the image, written in wet black marker, Daniel Mercer, clerical status pending. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. "That's impossible," I whispered. Ethan stepped between me and the basement door like that mattered, revolver raised now, flashlight beam fixed on the photograph. From below us, something knocked once, then again, then a third time. My own voice drifted up through the wood, patient and almost kind. "You can stop being chosen," it said. A pause. Then, "Or you can help choose." For a few seconds after the voice said that, neither of us moved. The flashlight beam stayed fixed on the photograph pinned to the basement door, and in that hard white circle, my smiling face continued developing into sharper detail. church office, filing drawers, one hand on an open cabinet, like I belonged there, like I had done that before. My first instinct was denial. My second was worse. Recognition. Not of the event itself, but of the posture, the ease in it, the quiet administrative calm of someone handling papers at the end of a long day. The terrible familiarity of being at work, inside a process you no longer question. I took one step backward. Ethan didn't look at me. Don't. What do you mean, don't? Don't decide what it means while it's still arranging the feeling. That sentence barely reached me, because the voice below had done more than frighten me. It had offered shape, not just threat, not just erasure, a role. And some exhausted, broken part of my mind reacted to that with a wave of relief so foul and immediate, I wanted to be sick. No more running, no more proving, no more fighting to remain attached. Just stop being chosen, or help choose. The logic of the trap was monstrous and elegant. I think Ethan understood what had passed over my face, because he finally turned and looked at me fully. Daniel. I didn't answer. Look at me. I did. Whatever he saw there made him move fast. He crossed the room, took both my shoulders, and shook me once. Not violently, just enough to interrupt the inward drift. That thing is offering you administrative mercy, he said. Do you understand me? I swallowed hard. Yes. It wants you tired enough to mistake participation for safety. The basement door creaked again. Below us, my own voice said mildly, "That isn't fair." Ethan let go of me and raised the revolver toward the door without hesitation. For one insane second, I wondered whether bullets would matter to a voice. Then the voice laughed. It wasn't loud, it wasn't theatrical, just a quiet, amused exhale in my own throat that made the hair rise along my arms. "You always point that at the wrong part," it said. The flashlight trembled in Ethan's hand. That frightened me more than if he had screamed, because until then, I had never seen him startled into uncertainty. Exhausted, yes. Guilty, yes. Afraid, constantly. But not caught off balance. "What does that mean?" I whispered. Ethan didn't answer. Below us, the voice did. "It means he still thinks this is underneath the town." The pause that followed seemed to widen the darkness around us. Then, softly, "It's in the systems above it." The smell of wet earth thickened again, not from the basement now, from the walls, from the papers, from the house itself. I turned in place and saw, with a clarity that made my stomach drop, that several of the notes on Ethan's walls had begun to curl inward at the corners, as though dampness were blooming through them from the plaster beneath. Ink bled slowly down one index card in a black tear. Ethan saw it too. "Get the box," he said. "What?" "The metal box, now." I snatched it from the table with numb hands. He grabbed the manila folder, the stack of rule cards, 2 cassette tapes, and a leather-bound ledger from the shelf. Then he shoved all of it at me in a staggered armload, while keeping the revolver trained on the basement door. "We're leaving." "For where?" "The church." I almost laughed. Of all possible destinations, that one felt like the most obvious mistake. "Why would we go there?" "Because whatever this is, it just confirmed the process runs through institutional memory, not just burial ground disturbance. The church archives may be the last place where the invitation pattern was handled physically." "That sounds like a theory." "It is. And if it's wrong?" Ethan looked at the photograph on the basement door, then at me. "Then we are already past the point where caution helps." That was impossible to argue with. The basement voice spoke again as we moved toward the front door. "Daniel," it said, almost gently, "bring the envelope." I hadn't realized I was still clutching it. The sheet with Bellmere's recommendation. The typed suggestion that had entered my life through Nolan's mouth was crumpled in my fist. I wanted to drop it. I couldn't. That, more than anything else, convinced me to keep it. Because if something in the dark below wanted me to bring it, then maybe it mattered in a way we didn't yet understand. We stepped out of Ethan's house into full night. The porch light was dead now. So were the neighbouring lights down the road. A power outage maybe. Or maybe Bellmere had simply chosen a cleaner backdrop for what came next. The air was colder than before. No moon visible. Only a low, overcast sky pressing the dark downward until the road and trees seemed to exist in a single flat layer of black. As Ethan locked the door behind us, I glanced at the front window. For just an instant, I saw movement behind the curtain. Not a face. Several, standing very close together, still as mannequins, as if the house were already occupied by a patient audience. Then Ethan grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the car before I could look again. The church sat on Main Street with its white steeple rising above the town like an old, clean lie. In daylight, it might have looked comforting. Small-town Protestant simplicity, neat hedges, modest stained glass, brick path leading to wooden double doors. At night, under a dead sky and with half the town apparently dark, it looked staged. Not sinister in any obvious way, just too available. Like a place designed to be trusted before it was understood. We parked behind the fellowship hall, where a gravel lot curved around to a side entrance. Ethan killed the headlights, and the church became a pale geometry against the black. No lights inside, no cars, no movement. Yet the whole place felt occupied in a way empty buildings usually don't. I tightened my grip on the metal box. "Do you actually know how to get into the archives?" I asked. "Yes." That wasn't comforting. "How?" He didn't answer immediately. Then, "Mara and I were here once." I looked at him. "What happened?" "We found evidence. Then we lost the right to remember most of it." Again, impossible to argue with. We entered through a side office door Ethan unlocked with a key from his ring. The same ring that had somehow grown a new label earlier. The interior smelled of old wood, cleaning solution, and paper that had spent too many winters in dry heat. Ethan's flashlight swept across folding chairs stacked along the wall. A bulletin board with faded community announcements, a coat rack, a children's Sunday school mural of an ark with smiling animals. The normalcy was almost unbearable. No occult symbols, no hidden shrine, just the machinery of ordinary community life. That, I was learning, was Bellmere's preferred camouflage. We crossed a narrow hallway into the administrative wing. 3 offices, a reception desk, a copier room, a locked records closet, and at the far end, a door marked Parish Archive/Storage. My breath caught. The words meant nothing by themselves, and everything. Something in me lurched toward the sight of that sign with the sickening familiarity of a half-remembered nightmare. I had seen that door before. Not in memory, in expectation. Ethan noticed my face. What? I know that door.
His grip tightened on the flashlight. How? I don't know. That too was becoming a pattern. He unlocked it. The room beyond was small, windowless, and colder than the rest of the church. Shelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, filled with binders, donation ledgers, baptism records, maintenance files, boxes of old newsletters, labelled photo albums, and county correspondence bundled with string. At the back stood a row of steel filing cabinets, paint chipped at the handles. Exactly as in the image that had flashed through my mind. Exactly as in the fresh Polaroid pinned to Ethan's basement door. For a second, the room tilted around me. I put one hand on the nearest cabinet to steady myself, and froze. My hand had landed in the exact place it had rested in the photograph. I snatched it back as if burned. Ethan saw and said nothing, which was somehow worse than if he had reacted. He moved straight to the filing drawers and crouched to check the labels. Not alphabetical, not fully. Some were marked by year, some by county department, some by donor family names, some by abbreviations I didn't recognize. Then he stopped at one unlabeled lower drawer and exhaled once through his nose. This is it. How can you tell? He shone the flashlight along the handle. A faint, clean rectangle marked where a label used to be, removed recently, or repeatedly. He pulled. Locked. From the metal box in my arms, Ethan took a ring of smaller keys, tried 3 in quick succession, then a 4th. The lock clicked. He opened the drawer. Inside were envelopes, hundreds of them, not stacked neatly, filed, each in its own slot like official correspondence awaiting action. Some were crisp and white, some yellowed with age, some thin as if empty, some fat with multiple sheets. I stepped closer despite myself. The first names I saw were ordinary enough to hurt. Mrs. Helen North Thomas R. Bell, Family Assistance, unsigned. L. Granger, E. Pike, N. Price, D. Mercer. There it was again. My slot, my envelope, no longer singular, but part of system. A drawer full of invitations.
My stomach turned so hard I had to brace a hand against the cabinet. Ethan started pulling files with frightening speed. Help me separate by type. What types? Handwritten insertions, typed recommendations, unsigned local referrals, anything mentioning transition, grief, privacy, low rent, fresh start, quiet pace, care facilities, temporary work. You knew all this already. Pieces of it. He handed me armfuls of envelopes and I laid them on the archive table in uneven piles while trying not to read too much too quickly. But certain phrases leapt out whether I wanted them to or not. Good place to recover. Short-term rental above Mercer Street. Safe if he needs distance. Not many questions asked. After what happened, she should rest somewhere small. A slower town might help. The language was always gentle, always reasonable, always positioned as help. Not commands, not threats, suggestions. Administratively compassionate. And below many of them, in different hands and inks, small notes. Likely yes, wait until winter, use cousin as source. Ask after separation finalizes. Too socially anchored, defer. I stared at that last one. Too socially anchored. As if someone were evaluating a person's removability. Ethan, he looked up. This isn't a haunting. No, this is a selection process. Yes. The word hung in the cold archive room like a verdict. My eyes dropped to one envelope with cracked blue ink on the front. Mara Velez. I reached for it. Ethan didn't stop me. Inside were 3 sheets. The first was a typed recommendation similar to mine but less domestic, more professional. Bellmere County Clinic periodically needs temporary overnight nursing support. Quiet area, affordable rental availability. Suitable for candidates seeking low-demand relocation. No signature. The second was a handwritten note. Recent bereavement / no local family / good observational habits but likely to rationalize. Still acceptable. I read that twice. Observational habits but likely to rationalize. The cruelty of it was almost academic. They had profiled her, not supernaturally, systemically. And the third sheet. My hands began to shake before I even unfolded it. It wasn't a recommendation. It was a form. Columns, checkboxes, notes added in margins. No official header, but the layout had the unmistakable ugliness of institutional paperwork. Across the top, typed, Recognition, Compatibility Review. Subject, Velez, Mara. Below, Recent grief event, yes. Immediate social tether density, low. Geographic displacement tolerance, high. Record-seeking tendency, moderate / monitor. Resistance to contradiction, above average. Clerical suitability if retained, possible. I went cold all over. Clerical suitability. The same word from my photograph. I handed the page to Ethan without speaking.
He read it, and for the first time that night, I saw something like horror move cleanly through him. "I've never seen this form," he said, "but you knew enough to come here." Yes, I didn't know it was this formal. Formal. God, that was exactly the right word. It was not the chaos of a curse. It was a workflow, a process dressed in compassion and handled through records, referrals, and human vulnerability. Bellmere did not hunt like an animal. it recruited. I looked back into the drawer. How old is this? Ethan pulled several deeper folders and swore softly. At the back, beneath newer paper, lay older ledgers bound in cracked leather and tied with cloth tape. Church council minutes, outreach correspondence, burial transfer notices, county partnership memos, the institutional ancestry of the thing. He opened one at random. Minutes from 1977. Most of it was ordinary. Roof repairs, attendance numbers, cemetery concerns, road expansion coordination. Then one line midway down the page. Pastorellery notes increasing pastoral burden of displaced names following transfer irregularities. Recommends private stewardship list to preserve continuity where public memory cannot. Motion deferred. We both stared at it. Private stewardship list, I said. Ethan nodded slowly. That's the beginning. No, I said. Not the beginning. The moment they stopped treating it like a wound and started treating it like a responsibility. That mattered. Because something awful becomes more durable the moment decent people decide it can be managed. Bellmere had not merely suffered an injury in its relationship to memory and burial and records. It had organized around the injury, created procedures, stewardship, continuity, selection, invitation, clerical suitability. The language of care had become a vessel for disappearance. From somewhere deeper in the church came a soft, metallic sound. Both of us went still. Another sound followed, a filing drawer sliding open. Not in this room, somewhere out in the administrative hallway. Ethan killed the flashlight instantly. Darkness took the archive. Only a thin seam of grey under the door told us where the hall was. We stood in silence. Then, slide. Another drawer opening. Then another. Methodical. Working its way down the hall, office by office. My mouth had gone dry. Is someone here? I whispered. Ethan leaned so close, I barely heard him. Not someone. The sounds continued. Slide. Pause. Slide. Like an office being opened for business. I clutched the edge of the archive table until my fingers hurt. There was something uniquely terrible about hearing bureaucracy continue in the dark. Not attack, not pursuit, sorting, retrieval, processing. Then a woman's voice from the hallway said, "Ethan, I found the North Ledger." Mara, or what used Mara best. The exact level tone of someone calling from another room after locating a missing document. Ethan shut his eyes once, did not answer. The voice came again, slightly nearer. "Ethan, I know what Daniel is for." I felt the room tighten around me. "No," Ethan whispered, to me, not to the voice. The hall floor creaked. A stop just outside the archive door. Then, very softly, My own voice said from the other side, "You were never meant to be removed." I stopped breathing. The voice continued, "You were meant to replace vacancy." Something cold and total moved through me then, not because I believed it fully, because part of me already had. The photograph, the clerical form, the strange ease in the image of my hand on the drawer, the administrative tone of the trap. Not victim only, function. The archive door handle turned gently, locked. The pressure on it stopped. Then came the softest knock imaginable. Polite, patient, as if I were inside an office and someone wished to enter. "Daniel," my voice said through the door, "you know how tired you are." I could not answer, even if I wanted to. Every muscle in my body had gone rigid. "You can keep being asked who you are," it said, "or you can become the one who keeps the names from spilling." The phrasing was brilliant. Not serve, not betray. Keep the names from spilling. Offer responsibility to the person already breaking under instability. Offer structure to the one being dissolved. Offer usefulness where helplessness had become unbearable. I understood in that instant how someone could say yes. How decent people in this town might have said yes for decades. Not to evil, to continuity, to management, to the promise that if the process could not be ended, it could at least be supervised by human hands. My knees weakened. Ethan caught my arm before I fell, and that tiny human touch, not magical, not symbolic, just a real grip from one frightened person to another, snapped something back into place. I looked at him, really looked. Exhausted face, ink stains on fingers, tremor in the wrist holding the flashlight dark, fear, guilt, persistence. Not a steward, not a system. A man who had been refusing for too long. "Ban it," I whispered. "What?" "The list, the envelopes, all of it." He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. "Ethan, if we destroy the drawer without understanding the ledger structure, the invitations may persist elsewhere," he whispered. "Or worse, the selections might go untracked entirely." "There it is," said my voice from outside the door, warm with approval. "He understands." Ethan flinched like he'd been struck. I saw then that the temptation wasn't mine alone. He had spent years cataloguing, documenting, monitoring. Fighting Bellmere, yes, but in the very grammar Bellmere preferred. Rules, ledgers, names, preservation. A rival clerk still thinks like a clerk, and maybe the town had been waiting for him to cross the last inch for a long time. The voice knew it too. "Open the door," it said to him softly. "You don't have to lose all your work." Ethan's face changed, not possession, not trance. Recognition of his own weakness spoken aloud. I made my choice before I had fully thought it through. I grabbed my own envelope, Mara's form, and the 1977 minutes from the table, shoved them into my jacket, then seized the nearest stack of invitations with both hands and dumped them across the concrete floor. "What are you doing?" Ethan hissed. "Making a mess." It sounded stupid. It was exactly right. Administration depends on order. Selection depends on retrievability. Process depends on files staying files. I swept another armful down. Envelopes fanned across the floor like dead birds. Ethan stared at me for one shocked second. Then understanding hit him and he joined in. We pulled entire sections from the drawer and scattered them. Bundles split, rubber bands snapped. Names spilled from slots and mixed across decades in categories. Typed referrals tangled with church minutes, burial transfer notices, outreach notes, donor lists, compatibility forms. A century of procedural order collapsed into paper chaos. Outside the door, silence. Then the handle rattled hard. Once, twice. Not polite anymore. We kept going. I dragged one leather ledger off the back shelf and slammed it open on the floor, tearing pages loose. Ethan overturned a banker's box of index cards. A storm of names slid under the archive table. Something hit the other side of the door, hard. The frame shuddered. But still, we kept going, because now the idea had me completely. Bellmere could invite, because Bellmere could sort. Bellmere could select, because Bellmere could retrieve. Bellmere could manage human looseness, because generations of frightened caretakers had continued the filing. Break the filing, break the handhold. Maybe not forever, maybe not cleanly, but enough to wound the system that had learned to wear compassion as a workflow. The archive door shook under a second impact. A woman's voice cried out from outside. Mara's voice, terrified and furious at once. "Stop scattering me!" I froze for half a second at the words. Not stop scattering the files. Stop scattering me. Ethan heard it too. His face went white. "The names," he said. The realization landed whole. What filled the gaps after removal did not merely mimic the lost. It organized itself through them. The files were not records of absence. They were containment structures, or channels, or skins. The archive door bowed inward with a splintering crack. Ethan grabbed my arm. "We need the North Ledger." "What?" "If there's a central continuity index, it'll be older. Not in the invitation drawer, somewhere separate." Another hit. Wood cracked near the latch. We searched in a frenzy. Top shelf, lower boxes, bound registers, maintenance archives. Then my flashlightless hand touched a narrow leather spine hidden behind a row of hymn donation records. No label. I pulled it free. A ledger smaller than the others, darker with age, tied shut by a faded cloth ribbon. The moment I held it, a jolt of impossible familiarity went through me, so strong my vision blurred. I had held this before, or had almost held it, or had been expected to. On the front cover, stamped so faintly I almost missed it, North Transfer / Continuity. Ethan, he turned, saw the book and swore. The archive door burst inward. Not wide, just enough for the latch side to tear and the door to jump crooked in its frame. A hand appeared in the gap, my own hand, pale in the dark, fingers curling around the broken edge as if about to pull the door fully open from outside. And my voice, suddenly stripped of warmth, said, "Daniel, don't make me use your face harder." For one suspended second, the hand in the broken doorway and the ledger in mine seemed to belong to the same system. A claim, a counterclaim, one trying to get in,
one trying to be opened. The hand flexed on the splintered wood. My hand, every small scar in the right places. The pale crescent near the knuckle from a can opener when I was 19. The darker mark at the wrist from a bike chain in middle school. Details no imitation should have known. Ethan moved first, not toward the door, toward me. "Open it," he said. "What?" "The ledger. Now." The hand in the doorway tightened. My voice from outside the archive went flat and cold. "Don't." I untied the faded cloth ribbon with fingers that barely obeyed me. The leather cover stuck for a second, then opened with a dry, reluctant pull of something that had spent decades closed around the wrong kind of truth. Inside, the pages were older than anything else in the room. Not church stationery, not county forms. Hand-ruled paper with iron-brown ink, pages warped slightly from age and damp. The writing changed from page to page, from one careful 19th century script to later, harsher 20th century handwriting, then eventually typed slips pasted over older entries. At the top of the first filled page, North Hill Relocation Register, Provisional Continuity Record. Below that, in older ink, for names disturbed by transfer, incomplete recovery, or public failure of witness. I read it once, then again. The impact wasn't in the poetry. There was none. The horror was in the matter-of-factness, a process already half accepted. Another impact hit the archive door. The frame groaned. Ethan grabbed the flashlight from the floor and aimed it over my shoulder at the book. "Read," he said. I turned the first page. The early entries were short. Anna Bell, marker moved, /remains uncertain, /husband reports recurring non-recognition at church social after transfer. Name retained privately. Samuel Wren, grave absent from new plot map, /daughter insists visits continue, wrong hill. Witness instability noted, added to continuity. Then, a few pages later, the language changed. Less pastoral, more administrative, more practiced. When public memory loosens after incomplete transfer, private retention may reduce spill. Names should be kept in sequence and attached to active stewards where possible. Spill. There was that word again, in another form. I turned more pages. Dates advanced, decades condensed into method. The ledger tracked not just the dead, but the living touched by incomplete remembrance. Families who miscounted their children after winters. Widowers no one recalled attending funerals. A teacher whose students vanished from recitation rolls but remained in her dreams. Each case turned into notes, then categories, then management. The continuity record had evolved from grief aid to operating manual. Another impact struck the door, harder. The hand in the gap pulled wider, and I caught a glimpse of an eye beyond it. My eye, watching. "Daniel," my voice said softly, "you don't have time for the old pages." That frightened me into speed. I flipped toward the center. There, a pasted county memorandum from 1977. Subject, North Hill Transfer Irregularities. Summary, due to roadway expansion schedule, partial remains from northern plots were relocated under compressed supervision. Several markers detached from verified remains. At least 11 boxes of fragmentary material could not be conclusively assigned. Public disclosure not recommended pending quiet resolution with parish and county partners.
I felt ice move through my spine. 11 boxes of fragmentary material. Not assigned, not named. "Keep going," Ethan said. The next page held parish notes in another hand. Pastoral concern. Families report disordered mourning, recurring dreams of unnamed kin, occasional failure to recognize known faces at burial services. Some names appear to detach from persons in conversation when North Hill is mentioned. Stewardship list proposed to reduce communal confusion and preserve continuity where assignment is uncertain. I could barely breathe now. The system had started as triage, a human attempt to hold together what had been broken by haste, secrecy, and bureaucratic cowardice. But then came later pages where the triage hardened. Rules, intake notes, referral language, selection rationales. Because once you discover that unlabeled remains and unstable witness can disturb recognition, you do not need to fix the original harm in order to manage the symptoms. You can build around them, and Bellmere had. I turned deeper into the ledger and found a section tabbed in red cloth. Expansion of private continuity. Rationale. Beneath that, in typed prose pasted over older notes.
Thank you for staying until the very end of this story. The darkness still hides many secrets, and more mysterious tales are yet to come. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you won't get lost in the shadows and will be the first to hear them.